Thanks, Bruce. Welcome, everybody. A humorous story came to my attention. I belonged to Minister's Listserv, it's called. And the minister from Fremont, California, J. Scott Neal, is always sending little funny quips. Well, this one I thought was worth sharing. Anyway, the story goes that there was a new chief in this tribe of Native Americans. And he was not quite sure how to handle his position. So one of the members of the community came to him and asked, it was getting fall, winter was coming, and one of the members asked, should we start getting firewood together now? And the chief wasn't quite sure how to tell him what to tell him. So he said, well, let me get back to you on that. And he went to a payphone and he called the weather station and said, what's the winter going to be like this year? And they said, oh, it's gonna be a really rough winter. And so he went back and reported to his community, it's going to be a rough winter. You need to really go out and get a lot of firewood in. So they went out and they got a lot of firewood in. And they went back to the chief and said, well, is this enough? He said, I don't know. I'll get back to you. So he went and he called the weather station again. He said, well, we have this much firewood. Do you think we need to gather more firewood? How severe is the winter going to be? Yes, you need to get more firewood. It's going to be a really severe winter. So he went back and he told his community, and they went back and they searched a little farther for firewood and brought in, and they kept bringing in the firewood. And finally, they said, well, is this going to be enough? He said, let me get back to you on that. So he went and he called the weather station, and he said, how severe is this winter going to be? And the person at the weather station said, well, it's going to really be bad. It's going to be one of the worst ones we've ever had. And the chief said, well, how do you know? He said, we've been watching the Indians. They've been gathering firewood like crazy. So that shows how everything's connected, and what we do influences the other person. Well, here's an important word to learn. An office reports that they have an answering machine that instructs callers to leave their name and address and to spell any difficult words in the message. So early one morning, when an assistant was reviewing weekend messages, she heard an enthusiastic woman recite her name and address and then say, my difficult word is reconciliation. RECONCILIATION. But in another sense, even though being funny, reconciliation is a difficult word. If not difficult to spell, it's difficult to carry out. When my son, this was written by Steve Goodyear, when my son was 11 years old, he came home from school in tears one day. A couple of the older kids had bullied him at the bus stop. Well, we soon learned that tension had been brewing for some time, and for several days there had been pushing and shoving and so forth, and now the conflict sort of came to a head, and his son, Rock, wanted to stay home from school that day. because of the bullying. So we called the school and found support. We'll be happy to call the boys' parents. We'll be happy to call the police. We don't know what we'll do yet, the woman said, the mother said. She felt that calling the police was sort of a last resort. But the next day was Saturday, and Rob happened to look out the window, and an alarm said, "There are the boys. There are the boys who beat me up." And the two older boys were standing in front of his house. I immediately began to think what to say, but my wife, Bev, a natural peacemaker, acted first. She opened the door and said with a smile, "Hi guys, would you like some ice cream?" They looked at each other in puzzlement. But they were teenagers after all. So they shrugged their shoulders and said, "Sure, why not?" So they followed her indoors, and Bev promptly introduced herself, and they began to talk and eat their ice cream. And Bev drew the boys into conversation while they were eating, and she said, "I know that I've heard there's been some trouble at the bus stop. I think there must be a misunderstanding somehow." And they nodded that there had been trouble at the bus stop. And as soon as they finished their ice cream, they nodded that it was over. There'll be no more trouble at the bus stop. No more trouble, and there never was. And so the vice president called the parents. He said, "Well, did you call the police?" "No." "Did you call their parents?" "No." "We just took care of it." And he said, "Well, how in the world did you take care of it? These are rough boys." And Bev said, "We fed them ice cream." We fed them ice cream. And even now, when I think about eating, there's just a melting, You sort of melt when you eat ice cream. You melt along with the ice cream. And so reconciliation is sometimes difficult, and sometimes it's best handled by a warm gesture, a warm embrace, rather than trying to fight the bullies or call the police or whatever. Sometimes just relaxing and being in the spirit of reconciliation brings a warmth to the other person. Brings a warmth to the other person. Reclaim Your Innocence is the title of our talk today. And we usually have a little discussion after the message, so you can get ready if you'd like to add anything, questions or make comments or whatever. Because rather than just you're coming here and listening to a talk and then leaving, what we'd like to establish is I will set a tone and share some thoughts, and then we'd like to hear from everyone. What are your thoughts about this? What are your experiences? Well, because everyone has something to offer. You see, each one of you has just as much, if not more, to offer than I do. We're all individual expressions of what we call the one power in presence. So each one of us, you see, is spirit expressing, is divine mind expressing. In fact, everyone on the planet is, except many people don't know it. And many people, even if they do know it, don't like it, because that brings a responsibility, you see. It brings a responsibility to each person. Ernest Holmes says there's one mind by which we think, one spirit by which we live, one body of which we are a part, and one light that lights everyone's pathway. It may not be the same pathway for everyone, but there's one light, one power and presence behind everything. And from the individual who knows the truth that underlies all things, lives in this world without danger. Every word reflects the universe, and every moment brings enlightenment. And so, what is this truth? This truth is that we're all one. There's one divine intelligence operating throughout the entire universe and operating within each one of us. One divine intelligence. So our philosophy does not suggest that there's a duality. There's not one and then something else. There's only one power and presence, and each one of us is on that pathway. And we don't need to be saved because we're not lost. We're not lost because we are already one with the one. Everything in life is moving itself forward in expression. Now sometimes I know we feel that we're going backwards. But the truth is we're always moving forward in expression. And what we talked about a couple of weeks ago and last week is life is always happening for us, not to us. There's a big distinction there. And if you don't get anything else today, get that. Life is always happening for us. Now, it may not look that way. And we may not understand how what something is happening is for us. But life is actually conspiring to support us. So there is a power for good in the universe, and we're using it. We're using that power all the time. So when things happen, as I call it, when things come up in my face, where did that come from? How did I create that? When things come up in my face, I need to stop and remind myself that somehow only good comes of this. And that's an easy little phrase to use, but powerful. You see, what happens is when we say, okay, I don't understand this, but I know only good comes of it, then we begin to see the good in it. We begin to see the good in it. And what we see is what we get. I don't know, some of you are old enough to remember Flip Wilson. Some of you are too young. But anyway, he's one of my gurus. And his famous line was, what you see is what you get. And that's metaphysically so true, you see. When we see good, we're creating more good. So it behooves us always to see the blessings of life. Whatever comes our way, It's a pearl of wisdom. It's tapping us on the head. Someone wrote a book recently called How to Use the Cosmic 2x4 to Hit a Home Run. It was on sale. Actually, in last month's Science of Mind magazine, if you have it, there's an article about the book that Judy Morley wrote. And an announcement that I didn't tell Bruce is the April issue of Science of Mind magazine is now in all the Barnes & Noble stores. All the Barnes & Noble stores. So if you want to go in and take a look, some of us subscribe to it, which you can do also. But it's for sale, and we've been asked to go into Barnes & Noble and ask if they have the Science of Mind magazine, that we'd like to see it, because we're, supporting and it's a wonderful magazine. I have a copy here. I'm going to read a little bit to you in a minute. So everything is the universe conspiring to support us. So nothing's happening just to us, it's happening for us. So as I said, when something comes in your face, you may want to just stop, whatever it is, and ask yourself, okay, what am I to learn here? How is the universe conspiring to support me by this event? What is there in this event that I need to know? There's some wisdom, you see, in everything that happens to us, because everything is cause and effect. Everything, there's no such thing as luck. No such thing as luck, and we talked about that on St. Patty's Day. No such thing as luck. It's all cause and effect. There's a divine pattern in the universe. And I want to read a couple of little thoughts from Science of Mind magazine. This one is entitled The Good and the Bad. The good in the bad, not the good and the bad. Okay. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this: good and bad are but names very readily transferable to this or that. See, it's all in our perception. It's all in our perception. This is an interesting story, I thought. On April 5, 1865, United States Secretary of State William Seward suffered a devastating fall from his carriage. He broke his arm, sprained his foot, and broke his jaw in 3 places. Well, what the Seward saw as an extremely bad event turned out to be what we would call good. 9 days after his accident, an assassin broke into Seward's home. Miraculously, Seward survived the vicious attack. How? The New York Times reported that the carriage accident was indirectly the means of saving his life. In order to help his jaw heal after they set it, doctors encased his neck in a wire netting, which ended up deflecting the assassin's blade as he tried to slash his throat. The bad was then transformed into the good. So it's all our perception, you see. Most times it's only in retrospect that we have these kinds of revelations about, quote, bad, unquote, events in our lives. However, as we seek to live a life centered in truth, we can stop ourselves when we start to judge something as bad. To live a life of non-judgment is a spiritual practice, folks. It really is. And, I catch myself thinking, oh, well, I didn't want this. I wanted this, I wanted that. But so all of this judgment is going on. But to live a life of non-judgment, or what psychologically is called fair witness observing, if we can witness our life or the life of everyone else on the planet simply as a fair witness without judging, whoa, think about how wonderful your life could be. It would be a lot more stress-free. You wouldn't have to worry about what everybody's doing. You wouldn't have to worry if they're coming up to your standards. And how many times do we catch ourselves, if only he or she would do such and such, they'd be so much better off. Well, how do you know? How do you know if he or she would be that much better off? But we judge. We're in this judgment mode. So one of the things we can do to improve our lives is to stop judging and to be gentle with yourself. Stop judging yourself. That's the first thing. That's a tough one. Stop judging yourself. Stop playing the woulda, coulda game with yourself. Okay. So we can instead remind ourselves and allow ourselves to be receptive to whatever shows up in our lives. Now, being receptive to what shows up in our lives doesn't mean we're going to embrace it forever. That's not what that means. As another one of my gurus, Dr. Phil, says, the first step to change is awareness. Awareness is the first step to change. So when we become aware of things in our life, even though we don't want them, that's the first step to changing, see? And be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself as you see these things that you would like to change. It's important to treat yourself gently as you go through changes in your life. So everything's cause and effect, and everything in the world is in a divine order of some kind, and our lives are in a divine order. We may not see the order, but it's there. There is an order in the universe. And if you doubt that, it's springtime. The trees know when to bloom. The azaleas wake up and say, oh, it's my turn. And they start blooming. Nature knows. Nature knows there is a divine order. And there's a divine order in each life. This is another reading from Science of Mind magazine. One particularly wet summer, the ants decided that my house was a much more hospitable environment than outside. So I got down on my hands and knees to follow their trail. We've all probably done that. I know I have. To determine where they entered the house. I followed them across the dining room into the living room, and they approached the corner of the room. I noticed a battalion of spiders had gathered there and spun a series of web in the ants' path, creating a gauntlet that the small insects had to traverse to get to their destination, and some were caught in the webs, and I observed them. So I sat back in awe of what I was witnessing. I was so overwhelmed by the absolute order of the universe. You see, the universe knows what it's doing. There is a power for good in the universe, and you are using it. You are using it. It is doing, even if it doesn't appear to be so. It is in divine order, even if we can't see the order. Now, here's the point that I want you to get on this. I asked myself what my life would look like when I saw something that appeared out of order, if I could step back, remind myself of the divine order all around me, and not interfere. And something's going wrong, just step back, see, and bear witness in non-judgment. Just step back and surrender ourselves to what is. See, that's the first step to change. It's not to be resistant to what is. Just, okay, this is how it is. I may not like it. I may want to change it. But this is how it is right this moment. And then we go about changing whatever it is. And in Science of Mind, we have a formula for changing things in our life. And it's very simple. You know what it is? You change your thinking. And when you change your thinking, you change your life. And we have what's called affirmative prayers. And this book is filled with affirmative prayers. And not only, I wanted to offer something to people to show them how to write their own. So there are steps in here of how to write your own. So that's how we change things in our lives. When we change our thinking, and I had this experience myself. I got my IRS return back from the accountant, and I thought I was going to get a refund. Well, it turned out I needed to pay $500. So I was a little upset that whole afternoon. And so I really worked with myself on this. I keep a gratitude journal, and every morning I write down at least three things. So I said, okay, I need to change my thinking about this. So I decided, well, one thing I can be grateful for is that I have the money to pay this. I have the money to pay it. How wonderful. And you see, just that change of thinking changed my whole day. Changed my whole day. So that's an example of what we can do to change our thinking, to change our lives. And then, you know, the universe says, oh, wow, Nancy's so grateful, I'm going to give her some more. Some more to be grateful about. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. So those are my thoughts for you today.